tell me about the interview. What's important about the interview and why is it important? It's most important in terms of establishing the direction or the intention. As far as being the most important logical soul, it's an integral part. It's just like roots to a tree. It's very important. Without the roots, the tree can't exist. Remember what I said about the interview process, it's divine listening. It's a step above the empathic listening. Empathic listening, there's still a separation between you and this person. Empathic means you're feeling empathy. You're starting to feel empathy with this person. You're feeling their emotions. You're feeling where they're coming from. You understand their challenge. You're hearing them completely. Empathic speaking is the highest level that most of us have achieved. And I'm sure at some point in our lives we've had empathic listening, like when we've been in the zone in conversation with someone. That's empathic listening, when you're really connected with someone and having a conversation. Divine listening is, believe it or not, even a step above that, where you and the other person, in other words, you're putting yourself in their shoes. You're actually being so much a part of their life, so much a part of their divinity, because, quite frankly, that's who you are. You're melding with that person in such a way that you're more than walking a mile in their shoes. You're feeling where they're feeling. You're seeing what they're seeing. You're touching what they're touching. You're becoming a part of the conversation, their internal conversation. And that's when you really read someone's mind. It's not because they're talking or because anything is happening. You're listening not to them speak, because that's listening to the conscious mind. A critical element of the interview process is that instead of listening to their conscious mind, you understand there are two beings inside this person that's sitting across from you. Their conscious being and their subconscious being. If those two are not in sync, there's unhappiness, there's suffering. You know that because they're sitting there. You know that there's an out of sync property going on with the person sitting across from you. Your job in this divine listening is to listen to that inner child or that being who's trying to say something but doesn't know how to speak. Are you with me? The hunas have an expression. The conscious mind is the uhane, the one who speaks. That's a hint. Okay. So the one who speaks is the conscious mind. The one who speaks is the one expressing verbally, trying to express verbally what he's feeling or experiencing. Whereas the one who's actually doing the feeling is the unihipli, or the ku. That's the inner child, or that's the subconscious being that inhabits the body, which also governs, by the way, the five senses, the memory, the psychic aka fingers, they call them in Huna, which reach out and touch the rest of reality, or touch the rest of creation. All things in creation are accessible by these so-called aka cords, aka aka cords or aka tendrils, which go out in all directions. So theoretically, we are connected with everything in the universe with these particular tendrils or connections. The unihipli, or the ku, is the only one, for example, who can pray to the high self. The high self is sort of the one outside the body, the being that, what we might call divine or God or whatever. But the high self is the one who, according to Huna, rains down benefits. Okay, rains down benefits means the conscious mind makes a decision. I want to make, $1,000 this week, whatever the thought is. So the conscious mind and the voluntary muscles, which are also part of the conscious mind, the uhane, the one who speaks, takes action. In other words, the voluntary muscles are part of the conscious mind. We're voluntarily moving around doing things. The subconscious normally will support that. For example, subconscious involuntary muscles will support my balance. My cerebellum is working automatically. My digestion is working automatically. You're listening to me, but you're also digesting that wonderful cake and whipped cream without having to think about it. Isn't that wonderful? And consequently, there's all sorts of bodily functions that are going on, some welcome, some not so welcome. All of these myriad ways of making things happen without us having to consciously think about it, verbalize it, say affirmations on it. You don't have to sit around all day long, I'm now digesting my food, I'm now breathing, I'm now digesting my food, I'm now looking at this, I'm now feeling that, I'm now touching. No, you don't have to think about any of that stuff. It happens automatically because the ku, or the unihipli, once it takes that conscious command, because you learned this when you were like 2 years old, how to walk, for example. So the unihipli takes that command and says, okay, integrate that and make it to where this is a given in all occasions. So then we start walking. Guess what? Walking is it's controlled following. by the way. If you ever stop to think about how you're walking, you fall. Because you're falling forward when you walk. Your other foot just happens to be there to keep you from falling forward. And when you ride a unicycle, that's a real trip. Because then you're just rolling forward and rolling to keep from falling. So that's a whole different thing. But the Unahipli, or the Ku, is a subconscious being that controls the involuntary muscles, controls the five senses, controls the memory. Just about everything you remember comes from your subconscious servant, the one who hands this memory to you on a tray. Unless you're somebody like Jason Oman, who lost his short-term memory and his Unahipli just sort of flaked out and is gone someplace, and we have to keep working with that. But most people's memories work to serve them. And a lot of that memory is not lost. It's still there. However, the conscious mind says, well, I don't need all this detail. Just give me this. And so the Unahipli, or the Ku, complies. It gives the conscious mind what it needs when it needs it, instead of everything all at once. Now, if you do something like bypass that filter, and you take something like LSD or something, you can open up those channels to where you start remembering so much stuff that you're overwhelmed. And that's not a good thing either. That's called a flip out. Ordinarily, your Ku or your Unahipli will feed you what you need in order to function properly, and it works hand in hand with that. When the two are not connected, then there's problems. The main problem lies in because the Ku, or the Unahipli, is also the only one who can send the signal to the high self. The conscious mind, by the way, does not talk to the high self. The conscious mind doesn't understand the high self. It doesn't even understand the concept that there's a high self. We can talk about God, we can think about God, we can think about divine, but we really have no concept because it doesn't, our mind cannot grasp the infinite. Our mind is an infinite tool, or a finite tool, where we grab things, concepts, ideas. We can think about God, we can think of divinity, but to actually grasp that is beyond the capabilities of the conscious mind. It just doesn't have that capacity. However, the Ku, or the Unahipli, can touch that divine, and does touch that divine, and that's where the divine comes from in us, through that subconscious being. Okay, so you got your Uhani. This is your conscious mind. Your conscious being, ego, whatever you want to call it. It's the one who speaks. The subconscious being is the Ku, or the Unahipli, much broader, much vaster, has all these tendrils going out into the universe. It connects pretty much to everything. One of the things it connects with is the high self, or the Aumakua, which is, let's just put the high self.
Oh, come on.
I'm not talking about, hey man, it's good stuff. No, I'm talking about high self in terms of not hierarchy or better or more valuable, but I'm talking about high self in terms of closer to divine, that divine part of us. So it's more refined, I guess, if you're going to use terms like that. A little defined as the Uhani because it's the mental aspect, it's the mind. The Ku is the grossest aspect. It's the part of our bodies, but it also involves these Akka tendrils and the psychic connections that we have as well. So actually, the two beings in the body envelop both subtle and gross. And so you can have gross thoughts. You can also have gross feelings in the Ku. You can have emotions. Emotions tend to be fairly gross because when you feel anger, that's fairly tangible. Intuition, however, is much more refined. The Ku, the emotions, the intuition would be the highest form of emotion, and that's the part which connects to the high self. And so with the Ku is also, by the way, the origin of our thoughts.